and that is this. One of the things that we've really been talking a lot over the last year has been all the buzz that came out when it was revealed that J.J. Abrams and Quentin Tarantino had been talking about a Star Trek project. And Tarantino gave JJ a pitch. JJ loved it so much he went to the studio. Studio then commissioned a script to be written under, following the outline by Quentin Tarantino. Would Quentin Tarantino direct it? All this kind of stuff. Now, Star Trek as a franchise has since gone through some bumps. There was going to be a fourth Star Trek film with Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine. That one came off the rails. Could this still happen? Tarantino's been saying it's still going to happen. Now, one of the questions that's been coming around then has been this. What do you do if you're Quentin Tarantino and you've publicly said over and over and over again, I'm going to do 10 and then I'm done? So what happens if he decides to do this Star Trek movie? Because he keeps saying he's still thinking about directing a Star Trek movie if it even gets greenlit, which is still a big if. But does that count? Does that count? And guess what? If you're wondering if doing a Star Trek film would even count, you're not alone. Quentin Tarantino has been wondering if it should even count. He was just recently interviewed by the folks over at Cinema Blend, and he said the following. He said, I guess I do have a loophole if the idea was to throw a loophole into it, which would be to go, I guess Star Trek doesn't count. I can do Star Trek, but naturally I would end on an original film. But the idea of doing 10 isn't to come up with a loophole. I actually think if I was going to do Star Trek, I should commit to it. It's my last movie. There should be nothing left-handed about it. I don't know if I'm going to do that, but that might happen. Okay, so it sounds to me like while he's leaving himself a little bit of wiggle room, it sounds to me here, Rob, like Quentin Tarantino is saying, if I do Star Trek, yeah, I could loophole myself out of it, but that's going to be it. I'm done Star Trek. Because, I shouldn't, try to backhand my way out of 10. But here's the question I've got, Rob. Who the hell cares whether he does 10 or 11? Nobody cares. There's not some filmmaker's Bible out there that says, ye shall only do 10 verily and hereunto. Like, there's no rule that says that. The only person in the world that is saying there's any importance to the number 10 is Quentin Tarantino himself. And while I respect that he's trying to leave himself a little bit of a wiggle room there with whether or not Star Trek would officially count as his 10th or not, who cares? The only person who cares about how many films you actually do, Quentin, is you. You have all the wiggle room in the world here, as far as I see it. So while I respect that he's kind of struggling with this a little bit, Rob, I don't see it being a real struggle. If you want to do 11, you do 11. You're not cheating. Like, he's acting like I would be letting people down if I did an 11th film. No, you wouldn't. The only person who's putting any importance on this, Quentin Tarantino, is Quentin Tarantino. So while I respect that he doesn't seem to want to break a self-imposed rule, it's a self-imposed rule. I don't think it should matter either way. So, Rob, there's a couple of questions here. Number one, the big one, I guess, is where are you at as far as do you think he's actually going to direct a Star Trek film? I mean, that's the biggest one. And then if he does it, should he just call it quits at that point, or should he just go on and do another 10th original film?
Well, first of all, Quentin Tarantino is one of our true auteurs in that he's a writer-director. And while he did team up with Roger Avary, who came up with some of the stories for Pulp Fiction, it's pretty much Quentin Tarantino's universe when he makes a movie. And I'm excited to see whatever he does, because in this day and age, having auteurs that are as creative and interesting and have such a command of cinema history and cinema language as he does, anything he does is interesting. I'm deliriously excited to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm going to be sitting in the Cinerama Dome, the theater that's actually in the movie, and I'm going to be sitting there watching the movie in the theater that's in the movie that I'm watching, which I think is great. As far as Star Trek goes, I don't know much about the Star Trek franchise, but the thing about what I'm really interested in his take, and this is sort of, I guess, blasphemous, is I don't necessarily need to see canonical, respectful Star Trek. I want to see the Star Trek. I want to see the Inglorious Bastards of Star Trek. I want to see what Quentin Tarantino does with the franchise is in his inimitable Quentin Tarantino way. I don't want to see something earnest that you bring somebody in like, Nicholas Meyer, what he did for Star Trek 2. He didn't know much about Star Trek, but he came in and knocked it out of the park. I want to see Quentin Tarantino take the Star Trek franchise and completely Tarantinoize it the same way he Tarantinoized World War II in Inglourious Bastards. I really want to see that. And if he wants to count that as his 10th movie or not, I don't care. I just want Quentin Tarantino to keep making movies. I don't understand why people impose these things. I know he wanted to, for his legacy and film history, here are my 10 movies. But I don't want to see him stop making movies.
It's an arbitrary number.
It is an arbitrary number, and I would say to Quentin, hey, man, let's not count your Star Trek movies, so we'll get at least 2 more Quentin Tarantino movies. That's the way I look at it. We're all better off as a people and a species, and certainly as film fans, if we have more Quentin Tarantino movies rather than less.
Well, here's the thing, though. This is the other thing. Superseding all of this, I don't think, whether it's Star Trek or whether it's another original one he does after that, I don't believe there's any way that we're not seeing another Quentin Tarantino after Star Trek or after whatever his 11th film is. All these creative people, the last 15 years especially, has been filled with, remember when Jay-Z retired? I'm done. Oh, look, and there's more. I mean, just in this recent UFC that was on, for those of you who follow UFC, remember 2.5 years ago, the California kid, Uriah Faber, retired? Guess what? He just came back and knocked out a guy in 30 seconds. So, I mean, these guys, I think they're being honest when they're saying, I'm done. I think Quentin Tarantino is being honest when he says, I'm done, but I don't think he's being honest with himself. I think at some point, he's a creative force of nature. The fires are going to burn, and in 5 or 6 years, it's going to be, I've just been hit with this amazing, epiphany of an idea, and I've got to make this film. But anyway, Aaron, let me throw this over to you here. Mm-hmm. We have been, Tarantino does not do pre-existing IP.
Right.
He doesn't do. He's always known for doing Quentin Tarantino films. Do you think it would even be a good idea for him to do Star Trek? And if he does, should that be his final one?
You know what? I initially kind of bristled at the idea because I don't want to see. If I'm going to see a Quentin Tarantino film, it's not going to be a Star Trek film. And if I'm going to see a Star Trek film, it's not going to be a Quentin Tarantino film.
And I think a lot of other people feel that way too.
Right. But the more that I think about it, the more that I go, wow, as long as I'm not married to the idea of seeing a standard Star Trek film with, insert any random director here, and I go, I'm exactly what Robert was saying, I'm going to see the Tarantino version of what a Star Trek film would look like. That is intriguing to me. That is exciting to me. But I also, I have to prepare myself that it's not going to be anything like what the previous films were. And I will say this on the standard of an actor or a creative person saying, this is what I want. When I first moved to Los Angeles in 2001, my goal, all I wanted to accomplish, was to be in a film that my friends could go and rent at Blockbuster Video. And once I accomplished that, I was like, done. I am a success. I can go home. I did that many, many years ago, but the bar keeps moving. And I think at a certain point, as a creative person, there probably was a time that Quentin Tarantino said, oh my God, could you only imagine if I could do 10 movies that I wrote and directed? What an incredible dream. And he's accomplished that at such a young age. So there's no possibility that he's going to stick to 10. Someone is going to say exactly what you just said, John, or he's watching this right now. Hi, Quentin. And he's going to go, oh, yeah, that's right. It is an arbitrary number, and the only person who cares is me. So let me start writing my next film.
Yeah, I completely. But the question here, guys, is what do you think about this? Number one, do you think he's actually going to be done after 10, 11? What is? Do you think he's going to do the Star Trek film? If he does do the Star Trek film, should that count as 10? So many questions here. Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys.